Hello, thank you, Aid. As you heard, my name is James Gibson. I'm a clinical scientist at the Royal Devon and Exeter Hospital in Devon in the UK. And we've been long-time users of SunCHECK in general, so I'd just like to share with you some of our experiences using user-created templates in our QC. So I'm going to start by covering what the department at Exeter Oncology Centre looks like, and then explain some of the benefits of SNC Machine and why we've chosen to move the majority of our QC record keeping into it in some ways that are perhaps a little more unorthodox. Finally, I'm then going to cover the small number of issues that we do have with it and how we've tried to address them, and maybe go into a bit of our future plans. So, as you can see on screen here at Exeter, we're a small to medium variant centre of 3 true beams. We have our own CT scanner and a brachy service. We've been using SNC Machine since about 2020, and in its time it's expanded to cover QA for our Linacs, our treatment planning system, our HDR afterloader, our CT scanner, as well as formerly our superficial KV unit before that was decommissioned. So we all know what SNC Machine looks like, and if you don't know what it looks like, I would encourage you to reach out to your friendly Sun Nuclear rep. But suffice to say, it's a web-based platform which we use to allow our physicists, radiographers, engineers, and technicians to record QC results. And it has a whole swathe of options allowing for automation of importing results, processing, and analysis, which I think is going to be covered a little bit by the speakers after me. But what I really want to talk about is how most of our templates have been built from the ground up, and how that flexibility is very useful. Right. So the main selling points for us have been efficiency. So over time, we've been keen to collate all of our QC entry into one place for all of the reasons that you're going to hear talked about by other speakers. I won't go too much into these points in detail, but each of them might be the sort of reasons that you would want to utilize custom templates in SNC Machine rather than using whatever your existing legacy systems are. The main point is that you can use these user-created templates to fill all kinds of gaps. So one of the ways to view your SNC Machine task is through the use of worklist view. I apologize that this isn't a particularly useful view because we happen to have done all of our QC at this point, which we can jot down to SNC Machine. But it collects all of the tasks across the machines in one place. You can see there's only one outstanding task for review there. If you do use SNC Machine for multiple machines or for a larger range of templates, I do highly recommend the use of the favorites feature. It enables you to filter down which machines you can see at a given time. And that also means you can test out any template changes on dummy non-clinical machines in order to avoid cluttering up people's views. This might be a more familiar way of looking at SNC Machine. This is Machine Workspace. For clarity, this is running version 5.0.3 of SunCHECK. So I'm just going to zoom into the view for our newest machine, Cramba, and you can see this is the full list of templates we have for it. There's a fair number of them, but this does encompass all of our daily, weekly, monthly, and triannual QC, with the exception of machine output for reasons that I'm going to talk about later. This is the example of our daily spreadsheet, or our daily template. This is based around the default template provided by SNC, but with a couple of additional tests that have been added in order to fit our needs. I believe the defaults are based on AAPM recommendations, but there's nothing stopping you from changing these to reflect the changing needs of your department. So for example, during the pandemic, we introduced a section for cleaning couch and machine at the start of each day, that kind of thing. You can also integrate your weekly tests using the scheduling feature shown here. So this is just going to only display tasks on a particular day of the week, which allows the people doing the task to not even think about whether or not something needs to be done, but it still allows whichever physicist is reviewing it scope to challenge if anything gets missed. This tends to be extremely reliable for scheduling weekly tasks when you're doing when you're executing a task daily. But what we find is that using the feature to set due dates to try and organize a wider schedule is a bit less flexible than we would like to be. So we tend to use Microsoft Planner, which is integrated into our teams in order to schedule when things happen, and then an Excel spreadsheet to record completion for long-term independent record keeping. But this is entirely a decision that we've come to ourselves rather than something that's innately missing from SNC. So this is an example of an entirely user-created template. So this was created by our chief engineer in order to cover all of our geometry checks. We have a more in-depth template that gets used after services and a stripped-down one for all other months. The key to this was trying to focus on a workflow which was going to be efficient for the user. But if you've find that something doesn't work, you can reorder them in the template editor. You can just move all the tasks around. So this workflow in particular, I don't know how focuses on establishing your true zero value of your couch before then using your setup of the couch to give true zero values for gantry and collimator, and then proceeding on to lasers, each step being dependent on the one before it. I will also point out that SunNuclear are currently working on adding these to the list of their user-created templates, so please do check that out when they go live. This is me just going to be explaining where to find them, but Aid's already done a far better job of me, so I think we can skip on past that. So behind the scenes of template creation, this is what the template editor itself looks like. This is one of the dummy templates I've mentioned earlier, which we used one of our old clinics where we had some spare room where we didn't want people to be particularly snooping around. So you can see that each of these tasks comes as part of a group on the left-hand side. So these task groups allow you to cluster together related tasks, which may share setup conditions or supplied information, and each task is an individual record within that group. So your tasks come in several varieties, and this is what the editing workspace looks like for them individually. So you have your results, which are numerical values entered by the user, which are being checked against tolerances. So for example, we have a measurement of our collimator deviation from the rotational plane for gantry. You can see we've input some units here in degrees, and we've set an expected value of 0, hopefully. You can look at the absolute value or a percentage change or a movement from baseline. So this is quite a versatile tool to be able to set some expectations when you're making measurements. It's also worth noting here that there's a lot of flexibility with use of warning and suspension levels. So for instance, when you're setting imaging tolerances, you may not necessarily want to set a suspension level while your images are still clinically suitable, but you're definitely going to want to know about changes to occur. So in those cases, we will often set a warning level in amber, but not necessarily set a corresponding suspension level. So some of the images are some of the other sections. So setup allows you to create setup instructions in the case of a particular device, for example, telling you to use it, or perhaps a particular SSD or field size for a particular task group. Your inputs allow you to enter numbers, which are going to be used in your calculations. This example is taken from one of our HDR calculations. And we have here checks, which are just tick boxes that can be shown or hidden from the user easily. I think also in the middle there, we have measurements. Yeah, you can see measurements there. It's hard to, let me just give a sec. Yeah, so you can see measurements in here, but it's a bit harder to grasp those. Those are measurements that are automated inputs from devices. For example, your data QA3 devices, your IC profiler, flatness and symmetry measurements, that kind of thing. So one thing that we did tend to note is that we previously were using these instruction sections just here to include all of our work instructions. This is a screen cap of the template editor. An external audit to us pointed out that these don't necessarily have an edit history, so you don't have an audit trail for any changes that get made to them. So instead, we have a PDF copy of our work instructions that gets uploaded to each SNC template as an electronic copy, and our QMS has appropriate systems in place to make sure that that gets updated whenever there's a new revision. This allows for easy access to work instructions while also ensuring that those instructions are integral with what we're intending to have people do. So later on, I think we have some discussion of the scope for trending and output measurements. I think trending and output is obvious use cases, but this is something here which is key to why we've moved towards putting so much of our stuff onto SunCHECK machines. So this is trending of non-dosimetric information. In this case, it's the vertical position of our A laser over time. You'll notice there's two different lines going on here. That's because we introduced, as I said, a streamlined check of our geometry for non-service months. And then we introduced that and continued using our more in-depth geometry on our service months. So you can see that I've just managed to pull these in side by side, and you can see it's almost like you're looking at one data set. Because it's all centrally held, you don't need to worry about porting the information over. You can just directly compare these results, even across multiple templates. So for instance, you can see the impact of amending your laser position on your results for Winston Lutz tests. It's also worth mentioning briefly, there's another option for your trending in the batch approvals workspace, which is the trending icon next to the task. It's a little more awkward to compare between templates, but it's really good for if you want to review a lot of tasks within a simple template quickly. This is a feature that actually we haven't had a chance to use much yet, but we were introduced to fairly recently. It's a very powerful tool, which is custom reporting, right? So you can create custom reports in order to pull out results, comments, approval records from any individual template from across multiple templates. So as an example, we do have a Elector afterloader, and we have recently had some divergent date time values between our TCC and our TCU on the order of about 2 minutes, which started to raise some eyebrows. We added a new section to our existing daily run-up template to record this, but beforehand our radiographers were just sporadically leaving some comments. Pulling out each of the daily checks manually would be quite tedious, but I'm going to say it took about 5 minutes to create and run a custom report, which just gave every comment that was left on our daily Brachy run-up template over the last couple of months, and that was a lot easier to keep track of. One area that we've been particularly thorough in our adaptation of templates is in our Brachy tests. So this section's at least partially covered on previous work you might have heard my colleague Lauren Robury talk about, but I've adapted some of it for this talk. So again, benefits of SNC's accessibility are that you can access this data through a web portal, reviewing can be done remotely. Training new staff who are familiar with it from LINAC run-ups going into Brachy testing is very straightforward. It's also, Brachy in general is ideal to entirely move towards using SNC machine. It's self-contained. We only need to maintain a single set of templates on a single treatment unit. The system's secure. The only people who are going to be getting onto it are people who should be able to access the information, such as the status of the number of sources we have on site. Taking a look, this is our current status of templates for HDR, so including daily run-up, pre-treatment checks before prostate procedures, a procedure for days where we don't want to run up the machine, there's no treatment. Your monthly QC for the Flexotron itself, for our gynae and prostate TPSs, as well as procedures for our source calibration and our annual applicator QCs. Additionally, we can use this template to embed complex calculations, such as this one that's used for source calibration. It allows space for electrometer and chamber factors to be input, as well as atmospheric and ion recombination corrections. Now, in terms of administration going forward, we obviously still have to input the data for each individual source, which is a potential source of error. However, we do have a track of each previous source, so we know that once it's correct in SNC, it will remain correct and we can compare them going back.